Hello everyone, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today I'm returning to take a look at a game which we've seen a little bit of on the channel before, but which I haven't really given a second chance since its initial first impressions video. And that game is Gettysburg the Tide Turns. Gettysburg the Tide Turns is made by Shenandoah Studio and published by Matrix and Slitherine Games. It is a turn-based war game that puts you in the shoes of either the Confederacy or the Union during the Battle of Gettysburg. The battle is very similar in aesthetics to some of the old Civil War documentaries that many of you are probably familiar with, where you see those sort of block diagrams of soldiers moving forward and back on maps, except in this case, rather than following, a documentary which follows history, you have the ability to fight the battle on your own. With that being said, my first looks video was a little bit skewed because, frankly, when the game first came out, it had some challenges from a reliability perspective, and it was really difficult to get through the first day's fighting. In fact, every single time I tried 4 or 5 times, every single time I tried, I ended up sort of just getting the game to stall at the end of the first day's fighting. And this was when I was doing the Grand Campaign, which takes you through July 1st, July 2nd, and July 3rd, and every time I got to the end of that first day, again, the game froze on me. There were some reliability issues with it. Now, it's been out for a little while, it's had a couple of patches come out, and I've decided to go ahead and take a new look at this and see, what is the state of the game today in December of 2017. Because it was a game that when I first started playing around with, I liked it a lot. It's a little bit beer and pretzels, as a lot of Shenandoah Studio games are, but it was also somewhat challenging throughout the first day of Gettysburg as the Union, as it should be. So what we're going to do here is this is going to be the start of a short series, because this is, frankly, a relatively short game, looking at Gettysburg the Tide Turns. I did do, I want to say, 1 or 2 videos of an online PBM game with the strategy Ward Gamer. That died because I was an idiot and deleted, or actually no, I was an idiot and there's a surrender option, basically, where you can choose to concede the game to your opponent, and I accidentally did that. I wasn't paying much attention. I didn't have a backup save. Yes, I was being stupid. So that series ended. So this is really my first attempt since my initial impressions video to give this game a second shot and see where it's at now. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump in and play. We're going to go ahead and play the campaign game, which takes place through July 1st all the way through July 3rd. You have multiple options here, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd days of the battle. You can also fight Pickett's Charge, just Pickett's Charge, and you can fight the best 3 hours, which was the Confederate attack on the Union left flank at Little Round Top. It was termed the best 3 hours by General Longstreet of the Confederacy, claiming that it was the best 3 hours that anyone ever fought. But we're going to go ahead and look at the campaign, and we're going to go ahead and fight our way through it, if we can get all the way through. I'm going to set the AI difficulty to Major General, or 2 stars, so we'll set it to normal difficulty. And I'm going to go ahead and play as the Union. It'll allow me to kind of slow things down a bit, hold off the Confederacy, and then, who knows, maybe we'll get aggressive and counterattack the Confederates, depending on how the AI plays. It'll allow me to take things a little bit easier, given that I really haven't played through a full battle in this game yet. So let's go ahead and play as the Union. We'll go ahead and play. You can see here the campaign objectives. There are 31 turns in this game. You start out on turn 1. The Confederate victories are to conquer 2 objective hexes. They currently hold 0. The U.S. victory conditions are to have more victory points than the Confederacy. And there you go. So you can see here when the game starts, there are 2 units on the field. The elements of the 1st Corps of the Union Army are arriving, and the Confederacy has the 3rd Division on the field. And what I mean by units is these are individual chits, where basically as we hit continue here, you'll see you roll a dice basically to decide who goes first. This is very similar to kind of a board game kind of feel. And in this case, the only 2 chits that were being rolled were the option for the 1st Corps to roll first or the 3rd Division to roll first. So again, the reason you saw those 2 units was those are the 2 units that you're essentially rolling a 50-50 chance to see who goes first. In this case, the Confederacy and General Heath's division will move first. So we'll go ahead here, and we'll see the Confederates are starting to move up in their first turn. Let's see here. It looks like Davis's brigade's coming up, followed up by Archer's brigade in line. And I think there's probably a 3rd brigade coming up as well, right? No, just the 3rd. Just the 2. Okay, so now we take over the role of the 1st Corps, which is not actually on the field. If we zoom out here, we'll see this is the map of Gettysburg, and you've got the 2 Confederate brigades coming up here. We've got some Union cavalry posted over here on McPherson's Ridge, near McPherson's farm, and then we've got the town of Gettysburg. We've got Cemetery Hill, Cemetery Ridge, Little Round Top and Big Round Top over here. You can see the objectives for the Confederacy are to hold 2 objective hexes. So if we zoom in a bit here, you'll see there's a couple of objective hexes on the field. Here, it looks like, interesting enough, Round Top is an objective, even though it doesn't show it. But you can see here there are Confederate objectives along Cemetery Ridge, all the way up to Cemetery Hill, and then toward Culp's Hill. I think the idea is if the Confederates take 2 of these objectives, they'll have a lodgment in the Union position at the end of the battle, if they still hold those, that will basically make the Union position untenable. This objective down here, I assume, represents the Confederates cutting the Taneytown Road, which is a Union avenue of supply and potential retreat. It would force them to retreat down the Baltimore Pike, but the Taneytown, I believe, is between the Federals and Washington, maybe? If they get in there, then basically the Union line of retreat is cut. You see, we're posted out front. There are no objectives out here in front of Gettysburg. Really, what we're going to have to do here is follow sort of the historical mantra and try and delay the Confederates before they can get ensconced along the positions and make us be the attackers. So you can see here we've got 2 brigades coming up. We've got Cutler's Brigade and we've got the Iron Brigade. We're going to go ahead and move Cutler's Brigade first, or sorry, the Iron Brigade first. They'll be first in line, and Cutler's Brigade will come in second. And these little circular icons represent where you can move your force. Again, it's a hex-based game, so it's, you know, very board game feely. It's designed to be like a board game. I think actually when the game was first being greenlit, the idea was there would be a board game version of it as well. Okay, so we've got Cutler's veteran brigades of, I think, mostly New Yorkers coming up, and then we've got the Iron Brigade already moved up. And one other thing worth calling out is these little square icons represent strength. So you can see the Iron Brigade of the 1st Corps is an infantry unit. Its strength is 6 of 6, represented by these 6 blue little squares. They're not regiments because the Iron Brigade didn't have 6 regiments, but again, it represents the strength. Cutler's Brigade is a veteran brigade, so slightly lower quality, but still good. Actually has a strength of 7, so it's slightly larger and stronger than the Iron Brigade as it moves up. This little star icon here represents the 1st Corps' sort of a reinforcement point, so most of the 1st Corps troops will arrive there. Additionally, I think some 12 Corps units will arrive up on this road on the Taneytown, but there's no one here yet. So that moves both of those forces, the only units we currently have on the map for the 1st Corps. All of our units have moved, so we can go ahead and hit the commit button. And now you can see here turn 2 of the battle, July 1st, 2nd hour of the battle. I guess every turn represents an hour or something like that. You can see here there are now multiple other options that can be rolled for. So you've still got the 3rd Division for the Confederates, which is going to have a rolling option. And then you've got the Artillery Reserve for the Confederates, which is a new unit that'll be arriving. And then you've got Confederate Combat. For the Union, you've got the 1st Corps still. You've got the Cavalry Force along McPherson's Ridge and Hill. And you've got USA Combat. So when we hit continue and we see that sort of almost like a die roll where it's trying to decide what will happen next, instead of just the 2 options, the 3rd Division and the 1st Corps, there will be 6 things that will have a possibility of rolling. I don't think you ever have back-to-back Union and Confederate draws, so like when the Union draws and you see here the 1st Corps won the right to move first, I think the next one has to be Confederate, but I could be wrong. You can see here we've got a lot more forces that are showing up here. These are reinforcements all coming up. But we're going to move the Iron Brigade first, just so we don't forget about them. You can see here these little circles, again, as represented by where you can move on the map. We can actually move much further if we stick to the road. So if we stick to the Emmitsburg Road, you can see here we can move really far. If we try and off-road it or go cross lots, as I believe actually historically happened, we can't move quite as far. So we're going to go ahead and stick to the Emmitsburg Road and hope we can circle around to get to the cavalry position before it's too late. So those 2 brigades are moving up. We've got Paul's brigade and Baxter's brigade, 2 experienced brigades, and a raw brigade under Biddle also coming up. So we're actually going to go with... they all look like they have the same movement points. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go with the 2 experienced brigades up front. Then we're going to go ahead and use Wainwright's... Well, actually, Wainwright's artillery can't travel that far. So Wainwright will just go here. And Biddle is actually coming in from the south. He's coming from a different route. So he's already moving along these side roads. These main roads are represented by these thick lines that clearly represent a road. These little dots represent sort of side roads or tracks or wagon trails, things like that. So you can move better on them than you can open terrain, but you can't exactly move rapidly, if you will. So I'm kind of debating on what direction to go with Biddle. He's a raw brigade. The safe route is to move him up this dotted line and eventually link up with the main road. But I'm actually going to move him west a little bit. My hope is maybe he can get along this, what is it, the Hagerstown Road? Is that what it is? We'll see if we can cut over that way. Although the problem is if we get pushed off McPherson's Ridge, that's going to make that really difficult. Anyway, that extends the First Corps' movement. You can see all units move, so we go ahead and hit continue. And now CSA combat rules. However, there's currently no Confederate troops able to fight. None of them are in contact with our troops. Their artillery isn't even on the map yet, so we won't see any combat occur. You'll see immediately jumps to the next move, which is USA combat, which again can't occur either. Well, actually, it can. Our artillery is at Caliph's battery. You can go ahead and bombard Davis. So we can choose Caliph to bombard Davis and commit. We'll see if he does any damage. And he does not. So bombards them. I don't know if there's any impact to bombardment, but at the very least it didn't kill anyone. So now you can see the Confederates are coming up with Archer's Brigade and Davis's Brigade coming up. You can see these little numbers represent how much damage is expected to be dealt by those brigades if combat does occur. But because both the Union and the Confederate combat turns have already been drawn, they won't fight this turn. So any combat won't begin until turn 3, which could be bad or good for us. If we see combat roll early in turn 3, then we might have some early advantages with Devon and Gamble engaging Archer and Davis at sort of a advantageous point. But the flip side of that is if we don't get combat early, then the Confederates might be able to bring these 3 brigades or these 2 additional brigades, Pettigrew's and Brockenborough's, forward so that we don't have the ability to fight them in an advantageous position. Meanwhile, our cavalry has not moved yet. The interesting thing with cavalry here is you can move cavalry really rapidly and quite far. You can see we can move them all the way north here if we wanted. But the challenging thing with cavalry is you can never move them adjacent to an enemy unit. So the Confederates move their infantry adjacent to our own, but we don't actually have the ability to move our cavalry adjacent to a Confederate position. So they always have to have 1 hex separating them. So you can use them as a blocking force, but it's really hard, if not impossible, to use them as an attacking force because you can never actually nuzzle them up against the Confederates to engage in combat. I'm actually going to go ahead and just kind of leave the forces in position here, and we'll see how everything turns out on the 3rd turn. You'll see the 3rd turn, the 11th Corps is going to start to arrive. So we've got 1 more chit for the Union. The 1st Corps is there. The 11th Corps is going to be another one we can draw. And then, of course, the Confederates are still just Heath's division and the Confederate Artillery Reserve. The first draw is the 11th Corps. So the 11th Corps has 2 brigades, Krisnick's and Schleswig-Flangling. The Flying Dutchman, as the 11th Corps was called derisively by Union forces. They're both raw brigades, so they're not going to be terribly reliable. I'm assuming that's to represent sort of their historical role at both Chancellorsville and then later at Gettysburg, where they were not terribly reliable. But we're getting them moving on these roadways here. You can see them marching towards Cemetery Hill and where our current forces are moving. Meanwhile, Heath gets the option to move again, so rather than have Archer attack Devon or stick in place, it looks like he's moving both Archer and Davis north to Oak Hill to flank our line at McPherson's Ridge. Meanwhile, he's bringing up Pettigrew to face Caliph's battery, and he's bringing up Brockenborough to face Gamble's brigade. So if we have combat here, and it looks like they're going to bring artillery up as well, if we have combat here, we can see Pettigrew's going to probably destroy this artillery and badly damage Devon. But the Gamble's brigade is actually in pretty good shape to give Brockenborough serious headaches. So, oh goodness, Confederate artillery was close enough to bombard, and you could see here that they did great damage to Devon. Devon is now attacked by Pettigrew. It looks like they chose to withdraw Brockenborough rather than engage Gamble, and now Gamble's brigade is the only cavalry brigade left. Devon was destroyed. Gamble is still holding the Herbst Woods, and our artillery is still surviving just barely. So, in essence, now we've got 1 brigade of cavalry left, and quite a few rebels coming up here to try and deal with. I don't know if we've got a good way to hold our position here. If anything, it feels like we need to preemptively fall back to Cemetery Hill. Historically, they held on Seminary Ridge for a while, but with the Confederates flanking wide and with only 1 brigade of cavalry left, the Iron Brigade's probably still too far out. I'm not sure what our options are. It looks like the unfinished railroad hex is here. Yeah, I don't know. I guess the Confederates have already moved their infantry, so they won't move again this turn. Meanwhile, our first corps still will get a chance to move before any combat occurs. So I suppose we can just put our artillery here on this hill, and then our cavalry can move to the railroad woods. Well, actually, we'll move them here, this defensive terrain. They'll move the Iron Brigade and Cutler's Brigade forward as well. Looks like the first corps gets to move now, so we've got Stone's Brigade also coming up. Let's go ahead and not forget about Biddle. We're going to move him up along this sort of side road, continuing to move him toward our position, although McPherson's Ridge has already been overrun. The Iron Brigade, how far can we get them in? I don't know how close we can get them yet. We can definitely get them to parts of Seminary Ridge. Not the whole thing, just parts of it. So we can get him to the rear of Gamble to prevent him being flanked. We can't quite get him to the unfinished roads, or unfinished railroad. I think what we'll do... let's see here. How far can Cutler get? Really wish the map dynamic didn't quite pull me back all the way to the corner of the map like that. So Cutler can move this way. He can move into the sort of this gap on Seminary Ridge. And then the Iron Brigade, as it kind of... I don't know why it keeps moving me. I guess it's trying to say you have reinforcements available, but I don't want to move those yet. Iron Brigade's going to move north to try and steady Gamble's flank. A lot of it's going to depend next turn what gets to move when. So we're still coming in. They could definitely defeat us in detail if we're not careful. But we'll move these reinforcements that are coming up the road. Stone's Brigade's also available. And that's the first course movement. Meanwhile, USA combat. There is no combat. I guess our artillery can bombard them again. We'll see if that does any damage or demoralizes anything. Doesn't appear to. And we're now on to the next turn. So who gets to move first? Oh, thank goodness. The first corps gets to move first. So we're actually going to move... Let's see. Can Cutler move there? Yes, he can. So the Iron Brigade's going to move into the railroad woods. Cutler's Brigade's going to move to his flank. And then Baxter's actually able to come up here. Refuse the line toward the rear. There you go. So we're now forming a line, not quite in the strongest defensive terrain possible yet, but getting there. We'll move Baxter forward into these woods, depending on if the Confederates move there or not. So we're reforming our position here on Seminary Ridge. We've got 2 more units to move. Biddle's continuing to move from the southern part of the map. We'll move him up. He's going to get onto the main roads here toward McPherson's Ridge. He'll move towards Seminary Ridge, and depending on if he gets attacked there or not, that may have played out very well. The first corps gets to move. Now, actually, the 11th Corps gets to move. We'll have 2 more reinforcing brigades coming onto the field. Ames Brigade, the one experienced brigade, I think, in the whole corps. The other 2 brigades, which are already on the field, Krzyzewski and Schleswig-Fleming. Again, I know I'm really bad with pronouncing some names. Are also moving out. So still not quite close enough to support, but they will be shortly. So we'll see here. The Confederate Artillery Reserve is going to move first. See how aggressive they move forward. Alright, so they're moving into the Herbst Woods, so they're moving in for close range support. Now our cavalry gets to move. So I'm not going to move Gamble, but I am going to move Caliph's battery over here toward the flank on Seminary Ridge. Just because he's very vulnerable there. I'd like the idea of moving Gamble in here to these to this unfinished railroad. I think it'll be a really good defensive position. Or I like the idea of moving him to the Iron Brigade's flank. But I don't think... I think we have to wait for another turn until more of our infantry is up to form a better line. So it is Heath's turn now. It looks like all the combat will actually occur after all of the units get to move. So that could make this a particularly bloody turn. Interestingly enough, Heath is moving Breckenburg into a very tough position. If we have the chance to initiate this combat, this Confederate brigade's going to be in rough shape. And oh my goodness, Archer just went all the way around her flank. Just marching straight pell-mell for the town of Gettysburg. That's interesting. Okay, so artillery, eligible units for retreat. Let's go ahead and retreat Caliph's brigade. And these 2 units can retreat as well. I'm not going to have these units retreat. I'm going to have them fight, hopefully, and break this Confederate brigade. Meanwhile, our artillery over here is going to retreat. So Pettigrew won't get to do anything to him. Meanwhile, Rockenberg's brigade is shattered and gone. No damage suffered by us, and that brigade of Confederate infantry is gone. I'm not going to advance my troops. If I advance them, they're likely going to be in a very rough spot when the Confederates have their chance to attack. And frankly, now that we destroyed that one Confederate unit, there are no other Confederate units bordering our troops. The Confederates have already moved here in turn 4, so all they should be able to do is bombard us with artillery. That is a very strong artillery battery, though. We'll just go ahead and continue. Oh, shoot. Pender's on the field now. Well, Pender will be too far away. You can see another Confederate division under Pender is moving up. Scales Brigade has arrived. Looks like an artillery battery under McIntosh. That's part of the artillery reserve. But then you've got Perrin coming forward. You've got Lane coming forward. So this is going to be a strong force that we're going to have to contend with here. Probably not for another turn. They might get one brigade into action in turn 5, but turn 6 is likely where they're going to be coming into action. Okay, so the Confederates bombarded us and did nothing. We're moving into turn 5. So you can see here, Pender's division has now arrived as a chit. Meanwhile, we're still just at the 11th Corps, the Cavalry, and the 1st Corps. So the first thing that gets to move is the Confederate Artillery Reserve, which is moving wide to flank Seminary Ridge. We may have made our spot a little bit easy for them to bypass, potentially. Especially with Archer going up and around our flank. See, the cavalry gets to move now. Which, frankly, I'm kind of just content to leave Gamble where he is. I just don't know what to do with Archer, because he is behind our lines. I mean, we could fall back on Cemetery Ridge. We've also got this. We've got Biddle's brigade kind of hung out to dry over here. This is kind of a clusterfuck. Caliph's battery of artillery. Put him up on Cemetery Ridge for now, and we'll leave cavalry where it is. USA combat. There are no combats to occur, and now Heath's division's going to move. We'll see if they try and go around our line or if they try and attack our forces. My guess is because the objectives are over here, they may just try and advance past us. You can see here Archer's brigade is doing just that. Davis's brigade is trying to flank as well, so we may have to shift our line. That blocking position that we had held, its value seems to have gone away. Essentially, the only reason that that line had value is it was the main Confederate roadway, but as these other roadways opened up to the Confederates as they advanced, our position has kind of been bypassed with quite a bit of our troops, so we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do here. Cutler's and Gamble's brigade next to each other, they'll have a good chance of destroying Scales' brigade there. It could be the 2nd brigade that they would shatter if combat were to occur. Union combat already did occur, and we didn't get to do anything, so nothing to be said for that. 1st Corps gets to move now. Now, the thing is, if I withdraw the entire 1st Corps, then Gamble's going to kind of be hung out to dry here against Scales. I don't really want to do that. But I can't just ignore Archer in our rear either. I think kind of what I have to do is try and mass against the Confederate forces that are here. I think we'll have to move Biddle kind of on a flanking move to go east so he can kind of cross lots over to the Cemetery Ridge area. Stone's brigade could move here. Pettigrew's flank. That would make Pettigrew in rough shape. Baxter's brigade could also move in on Pettigrew's flank. Iron Brigade could shift over here or over here. Do we want the Iron Brigade to help against Davis? I think we do. The Iron Brigade will face off against Davis's brigade. We can actually bring Cutler. I was hoping I could move Cutler over here. These guys are going to be kind of, not exposed, but they're going to kind of be off on their own. I'm going to leave Cutler and Gamble here to deal with Scales. We'll bring the Iron Brigade and Paul's brigade over here to deal with Davis. The artillery and Baxter's brigade are going to face off against Pettigrew. Those 3 units are all that we have left to move. We're not going to move them. So this is going to be a little bit of a mixed up fight. If one does occur, we can bring Krusnitsky's brigade forward and really hone in. I think Pettigrew will retreat because the AI will get an opportunity to retreat. We can bring these guys forward to face off against Archer. The other guys coming up the Emmetsburg Road. And then some additional reinforcements coming up as well. Additionally, we can bring this artillery over here, place it on Cemetery Ridge, and commit. So we'll see what the Confederacy does in their combat turn. They may retreat. Gamble apparently retreated on his own accord. leaving Cutler to face those guys over there. Meanwhile, heavy fighting going on down here in the south. This Confederate brigade, Pettigrew's brigade, largely got overextended. Has done some damage, but I think we shattered it. I think we may have beaten it. If not, it's almost dead. Yes, we did. All right, that's a big brigade, too. That's pretty awesome that we broke him. Eek. Davis's brigade is doing some serious damage to the Iron Brigade and Paul's brigade. They're fighting back a bit, though, so they nearly broke Davis. Meanwhile, Archer drove Flengling back. And Cutler versus Scales. Cutler shattered Scales. So 2 Confederate brigades destroyed, a seriously pretty powerful Confederate brigade damaged. Rhodes's division is coming in on the flank, presumably coming down from the north as historically occurred. And we'll see. I think a lot of this is going to depend on who gets to move when. So USA combat's first. So looks like we've got artillery facing off against Archer. Do I want our artillery to retreat, or do I want them to try and kill Archer? I'm going to take a risk here. The artillery did better than was forecast, and they destroyed Archer's brigade. So that's a 3rd Confederate brigade destroyed, with 1 down here under Davis crippled. Granted, our artillery did lose a fair bit of strength, but it did its job. Okay, so the Confederate Artillery Reserve gets to move first. We'll see if they advance way out in front of the infantry or not. A little bit. Pegram's brigade does a little bit. Now Pender's division gets to move. So that's going to kind of leave Cutler in the lurch. I really would like our 1st Corps to get a chance to move. Meanwhile, some fighting in largely open ground. Not really where I wanted to fight. I would have preferred to be along this ridge line rather than have these troops in the plain right in front of the town of Gettysburg. USA combat before we even get to move anything. So this combat's probably going to favor the Confederates. Paul's brigade's in trouble, I think. The Iron Brigade could be as well. We'll see what happens here. Campbell doing some damage. Okay, so Paul's brigade is shattered. Lane's brigade got a really bloody nose, though. It's down to 2 strength. And now Rhodes gets to move. Do we ever get to move? No, Rhodes isn't coming down from... Well, he kind of is. The problem here is Cutler has no clear roadway back to Cemetery Hill. We've got to really start organizing a defense along Cemetery Ridge here, because we've got no... We have no real... We don't have a position that we're holding, really. We're just kind of engaging at leisure. And a lot of our... Perhaps even Gamble's brigade's cut off now from a retreat back to Cemetery Hill. Nonetheless, we've done some serious damage to the Confederates. I think we've done more damage to them than they've done to us. I feel like we've destroyed half a division of their troops. East Division is in rough shape. But apparently the Confederates get to move everything before we even get to do anything. So Heath moving some artillery around. He doesn't have a lot of infantry left to move. And finally, the 11th Corps gets to move its troops into some positions here. So we're going to leave this artillery here. I think it's important to leave this artillery on the Cemetery Hill area. They'll provide some very valuable... Actually, let's do this. This isn't a bit of a salient. I'd rather have the artillery over here. Move... which is, Ames has experience, right? Ames's troops have experience, so we'll move them over here. And the rest of these guys are all kind of rookies. So, I'd rather have the 1st Corps kind of dealing the bulk of the line. Positioning themselves in the bulk of the line. Most of these troops are raw. These 3 points here are going to be the hardest to defend because the Confederates, especially this one here, I think, and maybe this one, because the Confederates can bring the largest number of troops against them without serious risk. Okay. Here, move him into here. And we're trusting that we get to move our first corps here shortly. The cavalry gets to move as well, but they're kind of pinned in here. You can see they really have no path to retreat. The cavalry has nowhere to go. This artillery we're going to pull over to the flank here on Culp's Hill. But Gamble can't even move. He's boxed in. We'd have to destroy Perrin and Lane to kind of open up these roadways for him. He can't move east. He could move west down toward Oaks Hill, I suppose. But that would be, I don't know where he'd be going, so I guess I'd rather have him engage Perrin than anything else right now. So we'll commit that. Now I've got the first corps to move, and again, the sort of Cutler's Brigade can't move many places. The Iron Brigade still has 4th strength. It's wounded. Ugh. Alright, Stone's Brigade's experienced. We're going to move them up here on Cemetery Ridge. Biddle's Brigade's finally arriving. Artillery over here will hold this non-objective point. Actually, what if we undo that? What if we stay aggressive with these guys? Maybe risky. Really tempted to do it. Pulling the Iron Brigade back to aid in the defense of Cemetery Ridge is probably the safe thing to do. Probably the smart thing to do, even. But sacrificing a few brigades to get in some licks against the Confederates might be worth it. Like, where's Cutler supposed to go? His brigade is all but dead because he doesn't have a way to retreat. I guess he could go over here to face off against Jenkins. Move Baxter in to support him. They could really give Jenkins a bad day. Maybe move him onto Jenkins' flank. Iron Brigade's still there, though. The only reason I'm debating this is if this artillery can engage Davis, he could destroy Davis. The Iron Brigade might be able to finish off Lane, but that seems a little bit unlikely, honestly, now that I look at it here. That seems highly unlikely, actually, because he's got 2, it's 1 and 1. I'd rather just pull them back to defend Cemetery Ridge. We'll keep the artillery there, though, because they could feasibly destroy Davis. And Baxter and Cutler are just trying to fight their way out, so they'll engage Jenkins over there to destroy, hopefully, the only Confederate cavalry brigade, I believe, on the field right now. The rest of these guys all kind of have to stay where they are, so we'll just go ahead and commit, and then we're going to move on to turn number 7. But, as I look at the clock here, it has been a little bit over 30 minutes now, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go ahead and end this video. This is going to be the end of part 1 of my new look at the game Gettysburg the Tide Turns. I'll go ahead and save the game, and we will come back with part 2. A good way into July 1st, the Confederate division under Rhodes is arriving from the north, or a little, I guess, sort of the north. They're coming on towards sort of the west part of the map. And you've got the First Corps in all sorts of positions, you know, just a weird situation with the First Corps having some troops on Cemetery Ridge, some troops fighting in the plains before Gettysburg, some troops cut off and about to be destroyed, 2 really important brigades potentially at risk in Cutler's brigade and Baxter's, but Jenkins is also at risk. So it's just kind of a bit of a cluster at the moment, but we'll see. A lot of it depends on how the die rolls. You know, if the Confederates come up first, if we come up first. They've got 6 chits to pull from. It looks like Early's division has arrived as well, although I imagine they'll be a turn or 2 away from actually being in place to do anything to us. And then our own troops under the 11th and 1st Corps largely going to be fighting on their own for the next few turns, I suspect, until the 12th Corps starts to arrive. And it'll be difficult to hold these positions with the 11th Corps. Given their raw troops, often they'll fight, but then they'll retreat, even if they get the better of the Confederates. So we'll see how this all works out. We've destroyed 2 Confederate units, or actually 3 Confederate units, I believe. We've almost destroyed 2 more. But I think that makes a good point to stop, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and we will pick this up in part 2 within a day or 2. So I hope you guys are enjoying the video. As always, feel free to leave your thoughts below. But until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.